Hi everyone, I am Miss Trout and this video is about creating a self-portrait and then filling it in with colored pencil to show value, form, and then when we're creating the portrait, showing proportion, balance, and then in the background creating a pattern as well. So getting some inspiration from Kehinde Wiley's portraits and their patterned backgrounds, and then focusing on the skill to use colored pencil properly and to add value with colored pencil and have good craftsmanship while doing it. So that's what this video is about. I hope you enjoy watching and thank you for being here. Alright, so just like in the previous video that I posted, I am using an initial oval shape and then creating a grid system using 3 vertical lines and 3 horizontal lines to create proportionate facial features, making sure that the ratios are correct, the percentages of the face are correct, and that everything is proportionate and in the right spot. I also want to make sure that it's a bit more symmetrical, not perfect, but close enough to where I know it's balanced as well. Here I am adding some more details to the hair by creating sections. Instead of filling it in with the pencil, I create these sections so that we can later fill it in with colored pencil to show value and make it look more three-dimensional to add form. Here I, as you can see, keep going back to the eyes. I find out that the right one is a little bit too high later on and the eyebrows were a little uneven. And that's totally going to happen. That's super normal. Making mistakes is happening all the time in art, right? But they're not mistakes, they're happy accidents, as Bob Ross likes to say. And it's totally fine to erase anything that you've done and go back. As you can see, I just erased the entire eye again, used a ruler, made sure that they were even, both of the eyes were even, and I redrew it completely. And I did it a 3rd time. So that's totally fine. If you have to keep going back to a facial feature and redoing it, please just do that until you feel comfortable with it. But that's why I tell my students, draw light until you know it's right, because you will keep erasing things and you're going to erase the entire grid system that we made. You're going to erase a majority of the shape of the initial oval that we created. So all of that will end up being erased. So it's really good to draw super lightly because of that. So you're going to find a shade lighter than your skin tone and use that light shade to kind of just fill in anywhere that you see your skin, really lightly using circular motions with the colored pencil so that you don't see the strokes of the colored pencil, and you're just going to fill that in completely. Using good craftsmanship, obviously, so you're taking your time, you're making sure there's no white of the paper showing through, even though you're drawing really lightly. And then you're going to take a more medium shade and start adding those shadows wherever you think a shadow would be. Underneath the hairline, around the nose and the eyes, the mouth, under the chin. That's where you're going to add that second color. Same with the hair. You can see I used that lightest shade to create just kind of a base. I'm going in with that medium shade and I'm adding value to create shadows. So going from dark to light. And to do that properly with the colored pencil, you're really just applying pressure where you want it to be darker, and then you're letting up a little bit and using less pressure where you want it to be lighter. So that's all you need to think about. Press down harder where you want it to be darker, and then gradually press down less and less and less to make it lighter. That entire time, you're still going to be using those circular motions with your colored pencil, ensuring that it's blending together really nicely. You have a good value scale and you're not letting any of the paper show through. You don't want any white space. You want it all to be completely colored in. And I would definitely recommend just starting lighter and using more and more layers rather than starting it out really dark and then having to erase it. That's much harder down the road. So for this, you can see I've already added maybe 4 or 5 at this point layers to the hair, all different shades of brown and yellow to kind of create more depth. Here I'm going in even with my eraser, which is totally an option. It doesn't completely erase it, but it does give a nice little highlight. So using subtraction to create those highlights with an eraser. So I'm going in, I added some highlights to the lips, to the cheeks, to the hair. And then I'm going in and adding a couple more shadows to make these dark parts appear even darker, to really add that contrast. And I noticed my skin tone needed a little bit more red, so I added some peach and some red back into my skin to kind of balance that out a little bit more. And I'm just using layers. I'm going over and over and over again, my skin tone, my hair, my eyes, my lips. My lip color alone, I think I used 6 different colors of colored pencil. So really, more is more and less is a bore in this case. You want to use as many different colors as possible. You want to make it as interesting as possible, and that's going to make it look more realistic too. We're not aiming for hyperrealism, but we definitely want it to be proportionate and we want it to look like us. Here I was telling the kids about Kehinde Wiley and his patterned backgrounds that represent the people that he creates portraits of. So for their backgrounds, they need to create some sort of pattern, which is something that repeats over and over again for their background that represents who they are, since this is a self-portrait. For me, I read roughly 150 books a year, so I'm drawing books and then obviously paintbrushes, paint splatters, paint containers, paint tubes, and a palette to create that pattern for my background. Here I'm just going back in, kind of like I did with the skin and the hair, just creating a nice light background, putting that base color in, using a slightly darker blue to go back in and add value to those. And then halfway through I decided my pupils were too big. So I'm going in, kind of fixing that, and then making my hair a little bit darker. I have more naturally dirty blonde hair, so adding in those browns really helps a lot to create contrast. Adding in a little bit more brown, and then going back in again with even another color for the hair. So when I tell you use more colors, truly, just as many colors as you can possibly use. I'm telling the students, find a colored pencil that is your skin tone, and then find one that's a shade lighter, and find one that's a shade darker. So minimum, they need to be using at least 3 colors for their skin tone and at least 3 colors for their hair. If their hair is nearly black, I explain black is really the absence of light. So if you find black in nature, for example charcoal, it's just an extremely dark brown. And if you're using a Sharpie even and you get water on it, it bleeds blue. For example, in anime, when they're drawing black hair, there's usually a blue tint to show shine, or a really dark brown tint to show shine. So I explained that even if you have black hair, you would use a black colored pencil, but you would also maybe use like a really dark brown or a light brown to show some highlights, and then possibly even a really dark blue color as well. So here I'm just showing how to create those values and using as many colors as possible to create some depth and creativity within the background as well. So as sort of a recap, every single section of your background and your portrait should use multiple colors. It should be level 4 craftsmanship, so that's the highest level of craftsmanship. There shouldn't be any white of the paper really showing through, and you should be adding value to pretty much everything that you can. So here I'm adding value to all the objects in the background, to the background itself, that blue section with the purple that I added in, and just adding any little last minute details that really make things pop and make the portrait pop as well. And now here's the finished product. I hope you enjoyed, and thank you for watching.